Hello everybody, I'm really glad you could make it here today. If you're new around here, thanks for dropping by, and if you are a returning viewer, it is so good to see you again. It is quite nice to put out videos in the new year, and as you can see from the title and thumbnail of this video, we are getting into Gunpla. So the kit you see here is Bandai's Tieren mobile suit. It is from Mobile Suit Gundam 00. And I don't really want to get into the Gundam lore too much, but I really like the look of this mobile suit. To me, it's one of the only mobile suit designs in 00 that I feel could be at least feasible in real life, and I understand that the world of Gundam 00 is set 200 years in the future, but despite that, I want something that looks like it could at least kind of exist, and that's what I like about the Tieren. That's why I chose it as my first Gunpla kit. So the kit went together really well, I think, like all of Bandai's kits, and it has been primed in just plain black spray paint. It really helps since this model is so big. There are all of these nooks and crannies and all these places where I don't think I can get in that much with a brush, so the black really helps with that. It acts as shadows, and as you can see, I am painting it now. I am using Vallejo's Field Gray right out of the bottle. Normally I mix my paint shades, but here's the thing, because this kit is so big, at least compared to what I normally do, I knew that I would run out of paint, and as a result I would have two slightly different grayish green colors, and I wanted to avoid that. I know that this issue could sort of be ironed out in the weathering process, but I didn't want to take any chances. I wanted a uniform color, so that's why I'm using Field Gray right out of the bottle. And I think it's a really good looking color. It is one of my favorite shades from Vallejo. And yes, I realize that all this footage could be kind of boring. I could help to cut all of it out, but I just wanted to demonstrate how big this thing is, because I'm used to semi-second scale armor. You know, these tanks, they fit in the palm of my hand. This is entirely different. I had to come up with a sort of new camera setup to get this thing in frame, at least in the end of the video where you see the final products. This thing is giant and it has a few advantages. A lot more plastic to paint. I can do a bit more experimentation with weathering and painting in a way that semi-second scale armor just doesn't show. But then again, it's a lot of plastic to paint, and as a result, I think I'm almost out of Field Gray. I do have to get a new bottle, but it's a color I really like, so, you know, no complaints there. But once again, using Field Gray for this one, I wanted to go for a sort of World War I tank kind of look. That's why I use the Field Gray. But as you can see later on in the video, you'll see my interpretation of this, I guess, sort of idea. So I'm painting camouflage on the legs, and this is something that I just go over with Field Gray. In the finished model, the legs are just Field Gray, but I wanted to take this opportunity to talk to you about how I do camouflage patterns, and this applies to armor as well. As you can see, my paint is thinned out quite a bit, and the motions I'm doing are a mixture of, I guess, brush strokes and stippling. I'm not doing these long, curvy, flowy lines. I'm keeping them, I guess, a bit blockier. They're not flowy. And the thing you have to keep in mind is, in this scale, 1/100th, and even going up to 35th, the people who paint these things, their arms only reach so much. As a result, they can't achieve these long, flowy sections, and keeping them a bit blockier, a bit irregular, if that makes sense, results in a camouflage pattern that is much more realistic. So I'm using Dunkelgelb for this part of the mobile suit. Once again, straight out of the bottle. And if we're just talking about World War II AFVs, I feel that this color is a bit too light, a bit too yellow, at least for my taste. But if we're talking mobile suits where there is no historical accuracy involved, I really like it. It adds a bit of color to the overall very boring, very drab
field gray. And as you can see, I'm also using white for these axis hatches. I think that houses like a 30mm machine gun, but once again, just to add a bit of color to an overall very dark paint coat. I'm also doing some camouflage for these shoulder armor portions, and once again, this is something that I later correct, but I just wanted to show you how, I guess, the painting process is a process. Nothing is really set in stone, but as you can see, my original plan was blocks of color, quite literally. I was using Tamiya tape to have these, I guess, rectangles of color. It was an idea I saw for some machine Krieger, and maybe it was the different colors that I used, but it didn't really turn out the way I wanted it. But as you can see, my original vision, I suppose, is to have I guess, an off-white, a bit of a tan color, and then these brown, yellow, and green rectangles. But once again, this is something that I go over, but it is, I guess, useful just to show how I change things. You know, nothing is set in stone, and as you can see, this is one of the changes I made. I painted one of the shoulder armor parts white. I really like the idea of a air recognition thing. Even though the world of Gundam is set in the future, I really like the older way of doing things, and that's why I use the white. It also helped to, I guess, break up the dull colors. And I am redoing the camouflage on the second armor portion. I took a bit of inspiration from World War I German helmets, but I introduced two different colors, or two new ones. That brown is flat earth, and the other one, the slightly greenish tan, is Vallejo's Imperial Japanese Army Parked Earth. As you can see, that's the color I'm laying on. What I was going for this one was a bit geometric, but still soft, if that makes sense. And I am painting the black lines. I'm actually using German gray for this one. If I were to redo this, I would remove the black lines. I really like the look of it without it, but I didn't want to have too thick of a paint coat. I didn't want to obscure any details for this one. Here I am painting the additional leg armor shield thing in the same manner as that last shoulder bit, but you can sort of see it from the start to finish. This is what I was talking about. I wanted it to be geometric, but because I'm hand painting, I couldn't get entirely perfect straight lines, at least not without wasting a lot of paint. So I decided to keep it a bit more rounded, a bit softer, if that makes sense, and unlike that last shoulder piece, I didn't do black lines, which, in my opinion, results in a more pleasing end product. Getting ready to apply the decals to the Tieren, and this is a trick that I picked up somewhere on Instagram. I forget who introduced this, but using a wet palette to store the decals. And the decals are just from a variety of armor kits. I just chose the ones that I thought really looked nice, and I have to say, one of my favorite style of markings that there are the World War II Italian tank markings. They're the blue rectangles with the number on the top. They look really nice, and they come in a variety of colors, so I'll definitely be using them on more of my mobile suit builds. And here I am just painting the pilot. I decided to give his uniform a blue shade, a bluish gray. Initially, I had thought about using orange just because of how bright it was, but I felt it didn't really, I guess, match well with the overall look of the Tieren, and the blue-ish gray suited it a lot better. The vest thing I am painting with German field gray, and I eventually paint his helmet with it's a very light gray mixture of, I think, I actually don't know the exact mixture, but just a very light gray to mimic the idea of white.
Here's the last bit of painting before we get to the weathering, and this is this blade thing that hangs from the back of the Tieren, and I'm painting the actual blade portion of this with German gray. It's a really good color from Vallejo, once again straight out of the bottle, and in the painting guide it says to paint this thing overall in a gunmetal color, but I thought it would be a bit more interesting if I had it gray and then I did some bare metal chipping, and the handle portion I am painting with a black color. I wanted to have a slight contrast between the blade and the handle sort of bit, so I figured that since the German gray was pretty close to black, I would just use black for that. And here I am, starting off some chipping. I'm using Hataka's gun metal for this one. I have to say, the Hataka blue line, it's a great line of paint. I am going to be doing putting out a video where I use the Hataka blue line entirely, but it's a great, line of paint. So I'm doing a bit of, I guess, distressing with the 50-50 mixture of German gray and flat earth, and here, as you can see, some bare metal chipping. So the weathering is started, as you can see, and I'm starting it off with a pin wash. Although I have to confess, my pin washes are a bit rubbish. So what I end up doing with the rest of this thinned out brown color is applying it like a general filter, and although none of this will be seen in the final result, I do think it provides us with a pretty good starting off point for all the future oil weathering. And I'm continuing the weathering with an dot oil filter, and this is done simply by applying dots of oil paints all over the model, and then with a vertical streaking motion, just blending it out until you get something really subtle in the end. This is the portion, or the start, of when the model actually looked good to me. It transformed a very basic, kind of boring, uniform coat into something just more interesting. And one thing to keep in mind is that on certain sections of the model, I'll use, say, more green as opposed to more blue on other sections of the model, just to keep things a bit more interesting and maybe allude to the fact that, hey, this mobile suit may have been painted in multiple locations with slightly different colors of paint. You can see the dot filter going on in the torso, and I tried something a bit different where I used lighter colors on the top bits of surfaces and darker colors on the bottoms of surfaces. In this case, the tan and white is going to be on the top and the brown and black on the bottom. And on these yellowish portions, the same thing, but since it's a different color, I'm using different oils. The white is going to be on the top, the tan is going to be in the middle, and the brown is going to be on the bottom. So what you see me doing here now is using some brown oil color to apply both forced shadows as well as general grime, sort of hitting two birds with one stone, possibly killing the birds as well. So as you can see, I'm applying this brown color into any of the places where I want to emphasize shadows. There are all of these little, I guess, these fun bits. The Tieren is a really fun model to do this technique on. There are those sort of rail looking things on the front torso. There are places where the edges meet. There's sort of the joints in between the arm sections, and this is what I do. First, I apply the color, obviously, and then I use a brush to sort of smash everything just so I don't get all these gross accumulations of oil paint. Then, when the brush is pretty soaked in thinner, I use it to clean up all the excess that I don't want, and if the brush I'm using to clean up the oil paint is especially raggedy, it really helps to create some patterns, I suppose. And then when that's dry, I'll use a brush that's completely dry to just blend everything together with some tapping motions as well as some sort of pushing motions, just until I get a result that I like. And as you can see, I am doing some chipping to this wrist thing. It looks like a watch. It actually holds a gun that will swivel, and I feel that place would chip up. So bit of a final touch sort of thing, doing some chipping on places that I think would warrant it. And what I'm doing now is just using some black color to apply some smoke effects. I thought that that sort of backpack looking thing would have some smoke effects on those grill parts, so I just use some black oil paint and some vertical stumping motions to simulate that.
I tried doing some rust effects with yellow ochre, but I felt that the overall color was a bit too light for my taste and it looked too much like dust. It wasn't very noticeable at all. And speaking of dust, here we are. I'd normally like to use oil paint for dust. I can have a bit more control, but I ran out of thinner, so here I am using pigments. I did experiment with the idea of using a wet brush to streak down some stuff and create some streaking effects, and for what it is an effect that I am actually pretty pleased with. And here is the finished product. I realized that I could have gone a bit further in terms of the weathering. I could have done some chipping, I could have done a bit more experimentation with metal effects for the parts that would be bare metal in all the joints, but overall, I wanted to keep things a bit simple for my first, I guess, foray into Gunpla, and for what it is, I am quite pleased with it. I want to thank you for watching this video, especially if you've stuck around to the end. I know this is a bit different from the usual armor, but I weathered it in a way that is applicable to armor, so I'm sure you can use these techniques on your armor build. I want to thank you for watching. If you like the video, feel free to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. It really encourages me to put out more videos. Once again, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next video, whenever that is.